Hi, and welcome back to Food Farms and Chefs. And I am very happy to introduce all of our listeners to Adam Diltz, who is the owner of Elwood, which is in the Fishtown area of Philadelphia. Adam, thank you so much for joining us on Food Farms and Chefs.
Of course, thanks for having me.
No problem. And for our listeners who, might not know you, your history growing up, like there's a lot of chefs who have read books in order to learn, obviously gone to culinary school, which I know that, that you incorporated that out of high school, but you have an interesting background in that you hunted, fished, and trapped and kind of brought home your own game growing up.
Well, I mean, where I'm from, northeastern Pennsylvania, the hunting culture is a pretty. I mean, it's hard to explain in a Philly, but I mean, we used to have off the first day of deer season from school, from school. It's a pretty big thing, the hunting culture back home. So, 12 years old is the age you can start hunting. So I mean, it's a big cultural thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure that added to your experience, your culinary experience growing up, because, you were exposed to a larger selection of proteins based meats that most people, who just go shopping at a grocery store don't come across. So I find it interesting that you kind of incorporate that into what you do now, because I feel like you use the entirety of an animal or a fish um, in order to present it on a plate. So a lot of accolades for you towards that, because not every restaurant does that.
Uh, yeah. Well, I mean, part of the hunting. Oh, I mean, we used to, butcher your own deer. I mean, you can take them to processors, but my family didn't. I mean, they butchered their own deer. They butcher. I mean, we grew up. I mean, I didn't grow up on a farm, but my grandparents had a farm. Great grandparent Elwood, the one I named, is my grandfather's name. He grew up on a farm. I mean, they used to raise. I mean, they made scrapple. They raised hogs. They made scrapple, and then hunting culture wise, it also. I mean, it was the same thing. You would. I mean, actually, they always said that you can't eat the antlers. My family was more. I mean, if you think about hunting, there's all like the trophy, huge racks on the wall. But I mean, obviously, my mom wants to shoot a big buck, but I mean, it was more about the eating the food aspect of it. That's what it was about. And
Yeah.
then really, I mean, going to culinary school and you read the great masters. You read a Scoffier or any of the old school. I mean, they were eating. They were game was a huge part. I mean, especially in the big the chefs to the kings and emperors or what have you. I mean, game was a big thing. I mean, game was even a big thing in Philadelphia at one time. I mean, hunters would come to restaurants. Philadelphia had the best French restaurants in the world. People would come, offer, hey, I got these, grouse, I got these rabbits, and they would sell them to restaurants. I mean, I'm glad we don't do that anymore because then there wouldn't be any, but it used to be. I mean, game figure is very prominent in the old school old French cuisine.
I mean, I have to say that I always feel slightly guilty, but I have had rabbit and I absolutely love rabbit. I think it's a delicious meat, like a protein, and it has a great flavor on your palate. Um, I know that it's probably difficult because of, it being a smaller animal, but in all the bones that are incorporated in it. But I have to say that it's absolutely, as far as game is concerned, like, and obviously not large, but like it's delicious. I've, as a child, like some of my family is in Vermont, so I've tasted bear, I've tasted deer. So, there's proteins that I've been exposed to that most people haven't. So the fact that, I'm reading about you and, reintroducing myself to you, because I have come across you before through various events and whatnot, and even in your history, because you worked at various places Tennessee and Boston and Chicago that you've worked in, and also under like James Beard award winners. So, you know, you have a large selection of history, a large uh pull from like experiences. And I'm astounded by you because, because of what you do, and the fact that like you make something that is so delicious and you incorporate the Pennsylvania Dutch form of culinary cuisine.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously I wanted to be a French chef and wish I was raised on in, and wish I grew up in Paris, of course, like every young cook. But um, I think that in particular, Elwood is, I mean, I lean on the Pennsylvania. I mean, that's what I mean, my comfort food is different from other people's. You could say, my comfort food is sauerkraut, and like I said, scrapple. My family used to make scrapple. We used to make shoe fly. I mean, and those sort of pot pie, the Pennsylvania Dutch pot pie. And so I think it's definitely underrepresented in Philly. But I also always wanted to do a restaurant that focused on Pennsylvania, Pennsylvanian. Not just food, obviously farm to table, but not just farm to table. There's also the aspects of, like I said, Pennsylvania Dutch things that people make, or Philly history, for instance, like you were referring to earlier, and the games like the turtle soup. That's a Philadelphia dish. I mean, the whole history of Philly is in that bowl. Not a cheesesteak. You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
those sort of things are very interesting.
Yeah, and they are very interesting. And I know that you also have collabed, or not collaborated, but you've also done tasting menus where you're introducing, different menu items to people. Like I earlier had commented on one of your Instagram pages because you had you were filleting basically an entire fish. Pardon the fact that my brain's a little foggy, but you had actually been like filleting it like on video, so you're showing, but you utilize that and introduce them.
Oh, the sturgeon. You're talking about the
Yes,
sturgeon.
the
The
sturgeon. Thank you.
yeah. I mean, I like to. I have these ideas or conceptual ideas with read, like we talked about earlier. All my books. I think that like some things are like the historical things. So not just to do a tasting menu, just to tweezer chef stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But I mean, in general, especially when I open, I try to have everything have a meaning to it, or a certain story. And I actually don't even do. I say I do the opposite of tasting menus at Elwood, because I do like a family style entree, like my great grandmother's. But when I do a tasting menu type thing, I like to do, like you're referring to, a historical fish dinner. When I had Tegan Schweitzer, the archaeologist, she came and did a talk on each of the, like, sturgeon was eaten in this area for thousands and thousands of years,
yeah,
and I think that's really interesting. But if I was a strictly farm to table restaurant, I mean, we wouldn't. I mean, nobody raises. I mean, sturgeons are endangered in this area. I mean, a lot of things are endangered in this area that we used to eat, which is part of the story, also.
yeah.
And so in that particular instance, yeah, I did a little a tasting menu. Basically, it was for a lunch, but it was still like based on the fishes of the region. And I've also done some before, like Pennsylvania Dutch, a folk tales book came out. I'm actually going to do another one, The Gilded Age. A friend of mine just wrote another book on the Gilded Age, and so we're going to do a little luncheon on her book.
That's very cool because, not everybody does that incorporate, but it sounds like you are often bringing in different authors and different people who can do not only like who can do a tasting menu, but like the historical aspect of it. And so it's a teaching experience in addition to a tasting experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the law. I mean, some of it is the lost foodways of the region. Some things like we don't eat sturgeon anymore. Or we don't eat. I mean, there's lots of things that well, I mean, even turtle soup, like I said, I mean, that was a Philadelphia. Like New Orleans has a turtle soup. Everybody
Yeah.
knows it. Everybody is part of. Well, they have a lot. I mean, New Orleans obviously has a huge culture, like a food culture, which
Yes.
I feel that Philadelphia could have had, but we don't now. It's all
I mean,
it's different. It's not what it could be. You know what
yeah.
I mean?
We do have a food culture, and historically, Philadelphia has certain things like Pennsylvania Dutch, like that is a huge area of Pennsylvania, of Philadelphia, and where we obtain like comfort foods, and as I read about, the fact that like your comfort food is pork and pork and
Sauerkraut.
sauerkraut. Yeah. And so
What's a
like,
New Year's Day? Yeah, Pennsylvania Dutch. We eat pork and sauerkraut on New Year's Day. Yeah.
yeah. And that's, something that is historically like relevant to, the Mummers Parade. So that's something big that people do, for that. But then I also saw that you have, I think it was um the seven sours and sweets, or sweets and sours. So I was curious about that, and whether or not you bring whatever that is from your childhood into your restaurant.
Well, I mean, Dr. William Moyes Weaver actually says that seven sweets and sours is it's a myth by the tourism industry in Lancaster. But anyways, I mean, but pickling, but I mean, in a way, it is true just because of the pickles jam. I mean, I used to go to like I was saying, the great grandparents' farm, and my great grandmother, she would have a whole room full of cookies, three different cookies, three different cakes, three different pies, three different, I mean, everything, all the time, no matter what. And along with that, they would always, have the jams, jelly. I mean, I grew up with some of the things I serve at the restaurant, are I mean, and my mom actually makes it. I mean, we call it freezer jam, freezer jelly, because you keep it in the freezer. It's not like canned in a canner.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? You can't leave it at room temp. But I mean, we would like strawberry, like now strawberry season. You pick strawberries. And would my grandfather take us to get strawberries, and then you'd make strawberry shortcake, and then you'd have freezer jelly. I mean, that's what I ate growing up. I mean, I never even had like a well, I won't name a name brand, but I never had like the cooked down commercial jelly until I like left. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But as for what you're saying is, my family style entree, I say it's like a cross between Thanksgiving at grandma's house and Korean barbecue, because of it's like mashed potatoes, vegetables, but also I put out a bunch of pickles too with it,
Yeah.
you know.
And so what are some more of your dishes that you create, that you put out for or offer on your menu, that are more popular?
Um, in general, you mean?
Yeah, just in general.
Well, I mean, my one signature is something you would enjoy. It's that roasted rabbit. I do a whole roasted rabbit. I mean, unfortunately, I'm trying to figure out primal. I was getting them from Heather, but she just closed. I have talked to her farmer, and I'm working something out now. But that is one of my signature items. It's literally a whole roasted rabbit.
Oh wow.
I also, like I said, the turtle soup I do is very popular. I mean, my pierogi dish is popular too. Everybody gets
Loves a
that,
pierogi, yeah.
yeah,
I don't know one person that doesn't love pierogies. I mean, you incorporate,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. And
exactly.
yeah, and so, given like how much you have going on, and you had mentioned that you have another event, that's the tasting event, where you're going to bring somebody else in, and it's going to be information along with the tasting event. How often do you incorporate those into your regular monthly kind of push?
Oh, I don't know. Whenever I'm inspired by it, or whenever I read something that, or whenever when we can do it, you know what I mean. Like last fall, I did a sort of a cider dinner collaboration with Ben at Plowman Cider, and I really want to do like well, it was like a farm. I mean, it's very, the farm style. We'd had goose, and I made a little, and it was a little sauerkraut strudel with, with his cider, and venison scrapple was one of the courses. So it's, I mean, I like to do it. I try to. Sometimes I want to do more. It just depends when you can have, you know, logistically find time to do it. You know what I mean?
True. I'm sure it's all very, very time consuming planning it and preparing the meals.
Yeah.
But in the last few moments that we have with you, is there anything moving forward that, you want to highlight other than I want to give you accolades for the fact that you were also a semi-finalist James Beard nominated into like restaurateur. So a lot of props to you for that one in 2020.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
last year. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. What was the question? The first one.
If there's anything that you wanted our listeners to like know about you, about your restaurant.
Oh, well, we also do tea service. I do a tea service Saturday and Sunday, and I put in, and it's kind of a, alternate history tea, not necessarily, but alternate history tea service sort of thing where I do, my Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. Shoop like cake is one of the little offerings, snickerdoodle. We have that sort of thing on the, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's pretty cool and it's different. So
yeah,
I do that Saturdays and Sundays. Saturdays and Sundays in the afternoon, like 11 to 2.
which is always good. Like, and I mean, a tea service is perfect. And now another question that I have is, perchance, do you ever do any seafood, like an octopus?
Do I? No, not really. I mean,
Okay.
the seafood I do will pertain to. It will be more pertain to the region or a particular sturgeon, for instance, like you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. That was a foodstuff of this region for thousands of years. I mean, I do striped bass. That is the quintessential, East Coast Mid-Atlantic fish. So I have striped bass on the menu lots of times. I mean, you never know though.
Just because I'm like, you were at, like, when you used to work at Johnny Brenda's, you were the chef when I was first introduced to octopus, and your hand is what made me fall in love with that. That's why I was mentioning that in particular.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Don't tell don't tell any of your Italian friends that thing.
Yeah, no, I know. I know
Wow.
several. But yeah, you were the reason that I fell in love with octopus, by the way.
That's cool. That's good to hear. Yeah. You
Yeah.
never maybe I will again. You never know what you can read, You never know. You see something that I would think didn't have any ties to what I would do, and then you read some, like avocado and like say crab salad with like avocados. Like you think that's like a new thing, and I found it in a cookbook from like 100 years ago, a Maryland cookbook. Yeah.
Oh no.
So you never know. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that you've read up on history, like, so much, like, obviously, as I mentioned before, you were on record, like you have a plethora of books behind you, but we unfortunately are out of time. So for all of our listeners who are out there, in order to, make a reservation or enjoy one of your lovely, lovely meals, where can they find you online and in person?
Sure. I'm on Talk reservation wise. The restaurant is in Fishtown. It's at 1007 Frankfurt Avenue. It's if you're like going from Johnny Brenda's on Frankfurt to, like, say, towards the Sugar House, towards Fillmore, it's that way. My website's elwoodrestaurant.com. And yeah, I guess that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Food Farms and Chefs. And I look forward to seeing your next big meal, big collaboration.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Come on down sometime.
I will. All right. And on that note, we will be right back after this short break. Hi, and welcome back to Food Farms and Chefs. And I am super excited and in the game with Matthew Hendricks, who is one of the owners of a very, very fun and amazing food and fun entertainment venues that is in Philadelphia, and also a secondary one which is in the Ardmore area
Yeah,
of
exactly.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the owner of Thirsty Dice and I think 21 Pips.
21 pips. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. So you have an interesting background in that most of the people that we bring on have like a large like history in the culinary world, but you're kind of coming from the background of a businessman who jumped into this after a trip to Toronto with his wife. So I don't want to divulge all of that because I talk a lot. But like let our listeners know how you got started and what inspired you.
Yeah. So my background has really been working in new product development, largely in healthcare and consumer products, which is a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot. But at some point, what I really started to get an itch for was, hey, how can I take a lot of the management consulting stuff I do and do it to something that's important to me? And so in 2017, I had an opportunity that kind of came out of the blue to go in on another business. And in considering that opportunity and kind of going through it, like going through the financials, all of this other stuff, one day I was like, man, this just doesn't feel right, but I can't understand why. And as I was driving into the city, I was like, I don't care about this. That's why this doesn't make any sense at all. And so I ended up telling the fella that I was talking to about it, like, look, this is not something that's going to work out. And then I started to reframe it and say, well, what could I do? If I could do anything, what would I do? And I started to think back to a visit my wife and I had at a board game cafe in Toronto called Snakes and Lattes. And really cool because normally if we go into a game shop, she's like, I'll just wait outside, and you take as much time as you need and look at games or whatever. And this time she came in, had a latte, we played a game, we played another game, then we ended up, she had a glass of wine and I had a beer, and it was just a really great way for us to enjoy time with one another.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's a lot more about the time and my wife and a lot less about the particular board game. Although I remember the games we played. I remember it was the Fin du Monde was the beer that I had, but that wouldn't have been memorable without the time with my wife. And so it felt like, hey, I think something like this would really work in Philadelphia and be important to me. And at a time when we started to just think more and more about, the engagement and people having very thin relationships with social media and all the ways that can kind of go sideways, which I won't enumerate, but that's where the whole idea came from. So we opened in October of 2018, and we opened 21 Pips in July of last year.
Yeah. And I threw a little research on you. There was an interview that you actually had with Phil LeDuc, which was published in Authority magazine on December 3rd in 2019. You had stated that you were listening to a podcast called, and I wrote everything down to make sure I got everything correct, so I could properly point
Yeah.
that out. But it was Shut Up, Sit Down.
Shut up and sit down.
Yeah, Shut Up and Sit Down. But you, the guest who was on that show, said something that kind of resonated with you, which is, that it's about the people.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of where your business model and even what you just had said, like it, is incorporated into what you do now. Because because now we're able to go into a situation, and during the shutdowns, like I know you had to, like everyone else, you had to pivot, and you had collaborated with what is it, Haven? Yeah, Haven Philly, with
Yeah, yeah,
rentals to
yeah.
continue that. So
Did do research. Wow.
I guess I did. So, what was that like, continuing during the pandemic with the game? Because obviously right now we're open and whatnot, just like really quick, like what was it like, and how was it scary for you to have to pivot, for that?
Ugh. Um, I'm going to be really honest and vulnerable here. Uh, it was not scary. It was things were at such a hectic pace pre-pandemic that there was almost like an opportunity to catch our breath,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was scary for all the obvious reasons. But as you know, it's a tough industry, and the pace had just accelerated to a point that was a lot. And so I think a lot of people did a lot of soul searching about themselves and about their businesses. And when we started to think about, well, what, again, to the point, was actually one of the host of the podcast, Quins, who had said that board games are interesting because people are interesting, right?
Yeah.
And just like I said before, it just comes back to the people. And so what we see our role in hospitality as is, how do we make those good times more accessible for people?
Yeah.
Just yesterday we were hosting a birthday party for somebody, and they were like, oh hey, we're going to play Ticket to Ride, and it's been a while since I played it, can you run through the rules again real quick? And it's
Yeah.
like the same kind of hospitality that you would put through just helping somebody understand what the different dishes are, or the sommelier, the way that they would tell you all of the things that make the wine that you're tasting, like, enhance how interesting it is and really
Yes.
connect you to it. That's really the ethos of what we do and the experience that we create for our guests.
Yes, and I did read up on that, and I think that's an amazing attribute, because there are people that walk in, and like myself, if I walked in, I really, like, I know how to play Monopoly, but I don't know how, like, and Catan. I do know,
Good,
yeah.
good.
I do have a little bit of a nerd in me, but but most games that are out there, I don't know how to play. So it's wonderful that you have somebody to liaison in, a novice like myself. But I'm going to use that to liaison, because you said a few key words, because I don't want to lose our listeners who love food
Yeah,
and beverages.
yeah,
You have a wide selection at both your locations of not only just food, but you also have, a locally, like, provide Herman's coffee
yeah,
based beverages that are
yeah.
alcoholic and non-alcoholic. Because got to have that espresso martini.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta have that. And Bassett's ice cream, because you've got to have that Bananas Foster boozy milkshake. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean,
And the
I mean,
chocolate peanut butter one too. Like
yeah, yeah.
that's my jammy jam.
Yeah, screwball whiskey in a boozy milkshake is dynamite. There's
Yeah.
no question about that. I mean, look, I think Philadelphia is an amazing food town, and why would we not take advantage of all of the great partners? I wish I could say it's not even hard. Matt and Amy Falco from Herman's Coffee, that was like a serendipitous introduction. Okay.
Hmm.
I was like, I was going to source another coffee, and I found someone, and I was like, oh, can you provide an intro to these folks? And Chris Barnes from Lucky's Last Chance was like, nope, but I'll provide an intro to somebody even better, Matt Falco. And yeah, it's amazing coffee, and it fits our brand so much better. And for anybody who's been to Herman's down in Penn Sport, like you see the craft that he puts into roasting his own beans, and it just, he's really, really into it, you know, and Amy's great too. So, you know, and Bassett's, all of that is really important. And we've
Yeah.
really tried to continue that with local cheese providers at 21 Pips, and we use Happy Valley Meat Company for our hamburgers, and like all that stuff really makes a difference. And obviously it's what consumers are into now, but it makes good economic sense too, you
Yeah,
know,
it
garnish
definitely
the
does.
produce, and like they kill any of the bigger providers on pricing, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd love to be able to tell you it's because I'm super altruistic, but it's also because it makes good business sense. So
It
it's good to win on both those columns.
Yeah, and it's also really good to like be supportive of your community, whether it's hyper local or it's local.
Yeah.
It's always a beneficial thing to like be supportive of those who you surround yourselves with, because you want to be able to support your community. And you know, speaking of supporting your community, I want to also give a nod to you because you offer like different events. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think, you know, we really want to try and get, it's again, part marketing strategy, because we know that differentiated experiences are going to pull people in. So looking for events that are going to be on brand and germane to, you know, the experience that guests expect at a board game cafe, but also fun and really different. You know, we have a couple of different local theater companies that we work with, where we do like a murder mystery, clue themed murder mysteries, you know, and that's always fun and brings a lot of folks in. We have our own version of Quizzo, that is, you know, take some of the traditional Quizzo, but also through some incredibly creative support from our quiz masters, really pulls in different types of games into the different rounds, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these great party games, just leveraging some of the approaches that they have to give something that's a little bit different. You know,
Yeah.
regular Quizzo is great, you know, but how are we going to bring our brand of hospitality to it? And so that's worked out really well for us. And for the private events, doing things like, you know, how about a board game? We had Comcast in, and we have another group coming into 21 Pips next Wednesday, where we have a game that can be played by up to 150 people.
Oh, wow.
We have a team building, a couple different team building approaches that work well, kind of like an escape room vibe, but something that you can play with as many people as you want, working together in teams, but the teams are working against each other, called Think Inside the Box, that has just been a complete smash hit for any corporate or civic or, you know, family group that we've ever run it for. So we really try to lean into how can we take all this knowledge of games that we've developed and use it as a way for people to ultimately just enjoy time with one another, just like I had mentioned Lynn and I did when we were up in Toronto for our
Yeah.
wedding anniversary.
Yeah, because I know I was like, I had being that I'm in the media world, I was and I'm a photographer, a journalist, and also on the radio. That I had a bunch of friends who started mentioning like, hey, you know, whenever you hang out with us, you're always like pulling out your phone and taking photos, or pulling out your camera, taking photos. So that kind of your story a little bit resonated with me, because I had that moment where I was like, no, if I'm out with friends, and I do this now, if I'm out with friends, like, yeah, I'll snap off some pictures, but then I put it down and it's face to face, connection.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that matters.
It really does. And I think one of the things that's always really striking to me when we have a group in we had a local school come in for an event not too long after we had opened, and the teachers and administrators at the school were like, I don't really know if the kids are going to like this. And it was something that was so refreshing for the kids, where it was like, hey, we're going to do something, and it's not going to be, I think so many cultural experiences have really gotten wrapped up, like going to a concert and just seeing how everybody's like, taping the entire concert with their phone. Like,
Yeah, you see
you
this now
actually
when you
gonna enjoy it, like take the moment, be into it, be aware of it. And games are just such a disarming platform, but ultimately it's not the games, it's the people, like I
yes.
said.
It's the interaction. And
Yeah.
then you add in the food and the drinks and whatnot, like, while you're playing the games. It brings an entire experience to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what are, like, you have a couple of minutes left, but what are some of your more popular items outside of the bananas forest boozy milkshake?
Yeah, the bananas Foster. Yeah, boozy
Foster,
milkshake.
yes.
Yeah. No, we've got at Thirsty Dice, the milkshakes and the ice cream, particularly at this kind of time of year, are a really big draw. But we've really gone through a lot of different things. I think the comfort food, just the snackable comfort food, is really some of the most compelling for folks. But I think we've got a pretty formidable sandwich roster as well. The Nashville hot chicken is really good. The other thing that's really worth mentioning is what we've done with our brunch program, both at Thirsty Dice and at 21 Pips. Because I think brunch really has the same kind of vibe, where it's, yeah, you're taking more time at the meal. There's nothing about brunch that says hurry up, or I just want to have something that's more functional. By definition, it's something that's longer. I was going to make a dumb German joke. There's a German word that they sometimes use to refer to brunch, which is Langschlafen Frühstück, which is long sleepy breakfast. And that's whenever I think of brunch, that's my nerd brain kicking in, and that's what I think of. And so it's a good experience. You can come in and have a brunch, have a mimosa, have an Irish coffee, play some games. It's just a really great platform to come in and unplug and reconnect with people you enjoy spending time with.
That is absolutely perfect. And where can people find you online and in person?
Me personally,
well, Thirsty Dice.
So Thirsty Dice is at Thirsty Dice on Instagram, and 21 Pips is at 21 Pips, the word all spelled out, on Instagram as well. We're at the same handles on TikTok and Facebook. It's pretty straightforward. So yeah, would love to have folks in, but don't spend too much time online.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Food Farms and Chefs, and I look forward to having fun with you.
All right, sounds good. I look forward to having you in. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
And on that note, stay tuned for the next segment.